Okay, we're going to get started. This is John Freeman. I'm the Executive Director of the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. I want to welcome everybody to our Thursday night solar stories. Tonight is the Ann Arbor solar story, which is the first, I think it's the first Thursday of every month. I really appreciate all of you for joining us tonight. We have a wonderful speaker, Simi Barr. He works for the city of Ann Arbor. He's going to introduce himself and tell you what he does. But I first want to thank our sponsors for tonight's program. The state of Michigan, Eagle is a sponsor, longtime sponsor. Harvest Solar, Homeland Solar, McNaughton and McKay, and then Serenergy, another great solar company. So with that, I'm gonna turn it immediately over to Mr. Barr, and thank you very much for joining us. It's all yours. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thanks, John, for the intro. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight and to talk a little about what we do in Ann Arbor when it comes to solar on municipal facilities. So with that, I'll share my screen and we can get started. All right. Looks like that's working. Well, great. My name's Simi Barr. I'm a Senior Analyst for Municipal Operations in the City of Ann Arbor's Office of Sustainability and Innovations. So a lot of my work is focused on decarbonizing municipal facilities and municipal operations, but I also do work with the city fleet and public EV charging. So if any of that's of interest, feel free to reach out to me and we can share information about that. So I'm going to start with sort of an agenda, quickly run through sort of how we got here, our A20 carbon neutrality plan, Ann Arbor, what Ann Arbor city operations look like, sort of a little bit about the building decarbonization process, and then renewables on city facilities, the implementation, the impacts, and sort of the steps forward, followed by discussion and questions, which I'm eager to hear from all of you. This will focus on, we're actually right in the height of a lot of solar installations going on at the city of Ann Arbor, so it's a really exciting time to be here and share with you. Some of these pictures I took just today or within the last couple weeks, because solar is actively going on at a lot of city facilities. So this facility at the right is the Gallup Park Canoe Livery. We installed a rooftop array. We installed a new pergola. The pergola needed replacing anyways, and we now have this really cool bifacial array, providing some sun protection and also solar energy. So Ann Arbor has a strong history of sustainability initiatives, and a lot of that is based in the strong history of environmental action coming out of the University of Michigan. So we're really lucky to be residents and to work for a city that has such strong foundation in environmental action. The Energy Commission and Energy Office are examples of some of the ways that the city has been engaged in energy work for really decades, and it's only advanced as time has gone by. We've had a Green Fleets program that's been around for 2 decades now. It was founded in 2004, which looks at the environmental impact of the city fleet. And we're working to continually advance the environmental sustainability and reduce the emissions related to fleet operations as well as city operations generally. So going to more recent times, in 2019, City Council declared a climate emergency and tasked the Office of Sustainability to create a carbon neutrality program with a draft strategy for achieving carbon neutrality by 2030. So that was A20, which in 2020 was unanimously adopted by City Council. The creation of the plan took in input from peer cities, as well as public input, staff expertise, and technical advisors. That was all sort of combined and distilled in a phase of ideation, prioritization, and then quantification to come up with the plan. This was all done in a relatively short period of time. About 3 months, a little less than 3 months actually, and involved multiple public surveys, town halls, public events. So we got a lot of great input to create the final plan. And here we see the number of working days, public surveys that all went into it, and partnership of lots of technical advisors and various organizations that were partners in the creation. The final strategy involves seven. The A20 plan involves seven broad strategies that boil down into 44 or so specific actions. And the first three strategies are really where that building decarbonization lies. So those strategies are powering our grid with clean and renewable energy, switching appliances and vehicles from fossil fuel to electric power, and significantly improving energy efficiency of buildings, basically. One of the goals within strategy one is actually powering 100% of municipal operations with clean and renewable energy by 2030. So let's get into city operations a little bit. Though we're a relatively small city, we've got a surprising amount of sites and facilities and assets that we have to account for when we're working towards citywide decarbonization. So, and they go from pretty small to pretty large. So we've got larger facilities like our water and wastewater treatment plants. We've got office buildings like City Hall and our election center, the Wheeler Service Center, which houses a lot of our public works staff and work. We've got streetlights, which account for a relatively large portion of our emissions and energy consumption, and also our parks, which range from really small parks where we're only powering some lights, so some really large facilities like Vets Park or Fuller Park, where they have pools, ice rinks, things like that. And there's a lot more energy consumption going on in those sites. Also included in city operations are the fleet vehicles we use. So we've got about 362 vehicles and fuel burning assets in the fleet currently. About 200 of those are light duty vehicles. And I mentioned the Green Fleets team earlier. The Green Fleets team is working to continually lessen the environmental impact of the city fleet and those fuel burning assets. So light vehicles like you see on the right are things like sedans, pickup trucks, minivans, SUVs. Most of the cars you see driving around that have an Ann Arbor logo on them are part of our light fleet. And we were happy to announce in February that we achieved 25% electrification of those vehicles. So pretty exciting. And then we have the rest being heavy vehicles and fuel burning assets. So things like refuse trucks, fire trucks, and then we have fuel burning assets. So those are things like lawn mowers, the equipment used at various park sites or golf courses, things like that. The annual electricity usage for the city of Ann Arbor is around 33 million kilowatt hours. So obviously that's a large number. For context, according to the Energy Information Administration, the EIA, annual consumption in a residential household is somewhere between 10 and 11,000 kilowatt hours annually. So we're talking about sort of the electrical consumption of 3,000 or so homes attributed to the city of Ann Arbor and our operations. When we look into that a little bit more, this is a pie chart, sort of spreading that consumption amongst building types here at the city. So you can see about 2/3 of it goes to water and wastewater treatment. So those are really big users of electricity here at the city. And we use graphics like this to understand, where our electricity is being used, and that helps us inform where we should be doing renewable energy projects as well as further building decarbonization work. The remainder goes into things like office buildings, street and traffic lights account for 11%. And then we've got things like the airport, police and fire stations, and parks as the remainder. So, excuse me. What does decarbonization entail? What does it really take to decarbonize a building? So the goal is reducing greenhouse gas emissions attributed to city buildings and fleets. And really that comes down to three things. It's energy efficiency, electrification, and that clean and renewable energy. And really that takes us back to A20 and the strategies of A20, because you may recognize those are really the first three strategies of A20. So let's get into the actual solar. So our first solar RFP was released in the spring of 2021, and it was to solicit bids for solar and battery storage installations at various city facilities. These range from larger facilities like the water and wastewater treatment plant to smaller facilities like parks, like some of our parks. There were two firms that were awarded off that. We actually split the portfolio into two. So Homeland Solar is working on a portfolio of those relatively smaller sites, about a megawatt of solar spread across a dozen or so parks locations. And the other part of the portfolio is awarded to a firm called Enerlogics, which is working on some of the larger sites. So those being our water recovery facility, formerly known as the wastewater treatment plant, the Wheeler Service Center, and the Ann Arbor Airport. Before this, so though that I say this is the first RFP we released, this was the first major solar RFP released by the Office of Sustainability and Innovations. Previous to that, there were a few one-off installations that included things like the Northside Community Center and Fire Station 6 down near Briarwood Mall. When it comes to the facility selection and prioritization, we're looking at things like what's the electrical usage on site, so that pie chart we just looked at, as well as resilience needs when it comes to battery storage on those sites. Visibility is a consideration, and projected savings annually. We also looked at a variety of array types, so roof mounts, ground mounts, and carports, all being utilized. And at this point, the city has each of these three types in operation currently, which is pretty exciting. As far as financing and budget impacts, we design these systems with the intent to reduce electricity costs on an annual basis for each facility. And by doing that, we free up operational budget that can be put back into operations or further energy efficiency and renewable energy work at different sites. We went back and forth in the process between ownership models. The two main sort of models we looked at were PPA versus direct ownership. And originally we were going in the direction of a PPA, where we would have been paying another firm for electricity, and they would have owned the actual installations for a certain period. But we actually switched to direct ownership, a direct ownership model. And that was mainly because of this third bullet point under funding sources, the direct pay provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, which allowed the city to access the investment tax credit, which we previously weren't able to do as a non-taxable entity. Beyond that, we are utilizing American Rescue Plan Act funding. So we've got a $4.5 million allotment for solar on city facilities there. We've also utilized the general fund and direct federal investments, previously known as earmarks. I want to talk a little bit about our recently completed projects, and then some of the ones that are still in progress. And this is where we've got some really exciting new pictures. This one on the left is a ground mount array at the Huron Hills Golf Course. It directly feeds into the irrigation system there. So we're powering the irrigation of the golf course with renewable energy. This ground mount array is right off East Huron River Drive. If you're ever driving down that road, you may see these arrays. In the center, when it comes to irrigation, so we have two city golf courses. The other is the Leslie Park Golf Course. And we also did a ground mount there for the same reason, or for the same purpose of powering the pump house at that facility. In the center, you'll see the first site I mentioned, which was the Gallup Park canoe livery. So I actually took this picture this morning. You can see the pergola over the solar pergola, and we're really excited about how that turned out. And it just went online in the past couple weeks. On the right here, we've got the Bryant Community Center. This is in the Bryant neighborhood where we've done a lot of work. In the past year or so, we expanded the solar system at the Bryant Community Center, so it has more capacity, and also installed battery storage at that site. It's when I talked about resilience, it's a site that provides critical community services like food distribution, and having that battery storage allows that site to keep operational in the event of an outage. A few more recently completed projects. On the left here, we've got this is Burr Park, the ice rink at Burr Park. We've got a roof-mounted system of solar on Burr Park there. I believe it's about 160 kilowatts, directly powering the ice rink and pool facilities there. If you're over there, you'll probably also pass the center picture here, which is cobblestone. This is a helioscope array, but this is a completed system on the cobblestone barn. I think it looks great. Cobblestone is a historic site, so we had to work with the Historic Commission to ensure that their sort of aesthetic was maintained, and I think we did a great job of it. And it's a really good, east-west facing system. On the right is the first system that got installed and went online as a result of this RFP that I've mentioned. It is the maintenance barn at the Leslie Park Golf Course. So a relatively small site, relatively small usage. So you can see we've got sort of a range of array sizes across these projects. Moving into projects in progress. So we started homeland at these park sites, started with, we prioritized based on the size of the site. Generally, we did more ground mounts and rooftop mounts to begin with, and have now recently moved into the carports. So there are 5 carports that are being installed as part of this contract. They all are paired with some level of EV charging. I mentioned, work in the EV space. So part of what we're doing in addition to the solar work is public EV charging and siting these in strategic locations. We're able to do both in these cases. On the left here, this is Burns Senior Center. This solar carport is paired with a battery storage system in the senior center. So we're able to, again, function while not connected, or if the grid went out for any reason, the power would remain at the center, could continue operations there. On the right here, this is at Fuller Park, so it's the largest of the carports as we've currently got as they're currently being installed. Um, this picture was taken this morning, so if you're around that area, feel free to poke your head by, and as long as you're outside the safety zone, and take some pictures, see what it looks like to actually put a carport together. They're pretty impressive. As far as upcoming projects, we've got quite a few, but two of them I've just mentioned here. On the left, we see our wastewater treatment plant, now referred to as the Water Resource Recovery Facility. We've got a relatively large array planned here. This is around 640 kilowatts DC rooftop mount. And worked with the staff at the plant to understand operationally where they could house solar panels related to sort of their operations, their facilities plan as to certain buildings are being added and taken out in the next decade or so, or even more immediately than that. So planning around those things. Roof replacements, all that sort of thing. So this is the plan as it landed upon. One of the exciting things about the wastewater treatment plant and the plan there is we're incorporating a relatively large amount of battery storage there. The wastewater treatment plant is on an electricity rate that has demand charges. So we're going to use those batteries for peak shaving and have some estimates that show pretty good cost savings that we'll have as a result. On the right, this is the Vets Park facility. So this is going to be the fifth and final carport that I mentioned. So of those 5 that Homeland is working on with us, 4 are installed or in progress, and this will be the 5th that's going to be worked on towards the summertime and later on, summer, fall sort of. So it's going to have a rooftop installation very similar to what we saw at Burr Park, but then a relatively large carport as well in the parking lot there on the east side. Beyond that, we've got still quite a few more sites where we're putting in solar. So those include the farmers market, fire stations, including Fire Station 1 downtown, Fire Station 3 right adjacent to Vets Park, and then Fire Station 6, we're putting in a battery storage system there so that it can function, so that it can store the excess energy that's created and use that on site rather than feeding it back onto the grid. We're also working at Southeast Area Park, now known as Bicentennial Park, the Wheeler Center, and the Ann Arbor Airport to do various installations. So since about summertime of 2023, we've installed about 350 kilowatts of behind-the-meter solar on city facilities, but many, many more to come. So ultimately, once all of these are done, we're talking about 3+ megawatts of behind the meters solar at city facilities, which is quite exciting. As far as impacts, we're seeing reductions in monthly electricity costs at the sites where we put these in. We've got more comprehensive analysis upcoming. Like I said, many of these have only gone online in the past month or so. So we're definitely going to be analyzing that thoroughly over the coming months. And we're seeing reduction in grid electricity used on site, which is ultimately what plays into our goal of reducing the emissions related to city operations and community-wide emissions. And then seeing resilience, the ability for critical sites to continue functioning during a grid outage. So I just took this screenshot off of Solar Edge. Most of the work we're doing currently it has Solar Edge inverters, so that we're all sort of getting data in the same place. This is from Bryant Community Center, but we can see we've got a fully charged battery. And in the event the grid is to go down, the facility can start being directly powered by that battery on site. As far as upcoming decarbonization projects, we've got a lot more in the mix. So as well as the sites I mentioned, we've got a grid scale project, the landfill solar project in Pittsfield Township. So this is the capped landfill on the right that we're seeing, and we're showing it's a planned use development in Pittsfield. So it's going to be a 20 megawatt or so grid scale array. This is not behind the meter, but it's sort of as close to community solar as we've got. And in the event that residents of Ann Arbor would not sign on to offtake this electricity, then it's going to be used directly for city operations. The city is going to be the main offtaker of that, is my understanding of the agreement. We're also working on a decarbonization study of multiple city facilities, but one of those includes our new election center up on Miller Road, and decarbonization of the Bryant Community Center and the creation of a living, learning decarbonization lab for that neighborhood and the community as a whole, that they can come into the center and see what a fully electrified site looks like, what a decarbonized site looks like, understand the energy efficiency and electrification improvements that have been made in that building, as well as the renewable energy and energy storage components that are there. So with that, I think that's all I had to run through. I really appreciate the time, and happy to take questions and open it up for discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Simi. This was an amazing presentation. Why don't you take down your presentation so we all can see each other? And why don't we open up for questions? I know my good friend Leandre had a question in the chat, and then it looks as though Marcia's got a question. But why don't we start with Lee, and then we'll go from there. Lee, you're on mute.
I thought you were going to just read my question. So
I'd
how big is the battery at the sewage plant?
I just pulled it up. Give me 1 second. I believe I'm sorry, I don't have it right in front of me. I'll pull it up so I don't give you the wrong number.
Okay. A great presentation.
Well, thank you.
And I didn't hear the words DTE any place in the presentation. So I wish you the best on whatever you're doing in that regard.
I mean, let's just follow up on that. Has DTE been cooperative? I mean, I know they pretty much have to, but sometimes they can always slow foot it if they wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So we've had mixed experiences when it comes to solar at city facilities. Generally, we've been able to make these things happen, but they definitely can take time going through the interconnection process of DTE. Also, DTE is only going to allow systems that are sized to the annual usage of a facility. So that's been a struggle sometimes when we know that in the immediate future, we're trying to electrify, we're trying to add EV charging and things like that. And we want to account for those earlier on in the process. So by saying, we're planning to electrify this amount of HVAC equipment, and we're planning to add in this many EV chargers, we could upsize solar a little bit. But it definitely has been a struggle. There have been sites that, because of DTE regulations on their interconnection, we've had to drop from our immediate portfolio, because sort of the cost per watt has gotten sort of untenable. So overall, they haven't been a barrier in the sense that we have been able to implement at all of these sites. But there are definite considerations we have to have, and it can slow the process sometime.
Now, I should probably know this answer, but one of the laws that the legislature enacted last November, it increased the capacity of systems to 110% of the historical use of a homeowner. I'm assuming that probably applies to city buildings as well. So you could factor in if you expect to need more electricity for, like, for instance, electric vehicles or whatever. So,
Right. Yeah, that's the case. It's sometimes we're talking about multiple electric vehicle chargers, and the capacity that can add can sort of exceed that 10%, and that's where sort of back and forth with DTE start happening.
sure, sure. Sounds good. Marcia, did you have a
Yeah.
question? Did you have
Yes,
go ahead,
I
Marcia.
do. My question concerns the historic property. I have a condo in Traverse City in a historic building. And we have been told, no way, solar panels. What were the requirements you had to meet to modify or to get the permission from the Historic Society, or to get them on that building you showed us?
Yeah. My understanding was it wasn't incredibly significant for us in this case. We had to use all black solar panels. I think that was the main requirement for us and the Ann Arbor Historic Commission. That may differ. I know Julie
So
Roth was
this is an Ann Arbor Historic Commission and not the state one?
correct. Yeah, Ann Arbor.
We have to deal with a state one. Okay.
Yeah, so I think maybe contacting the Ann Arbor Historic Commission and understanding their relationship with the State Historic Commission might be helpful. But I know solar has been allowed at historic sites here in town.
Marcia, wouldn't you be dealing with, like, the Traverse City Historical Society?
No, it's the old state hospital,
Ah,
which is a huge building. I mean, this building I'm in is about a quarter of a mile long.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a big building.
And yeah, and there are lots of other buildings on the property.
I see.
And in way over by the historic barns, which is not part of well, it was part of the historic property, but it isn't part of the Minervini project. They had some solar panels over there, and they had to get rid of them. I mean, they were on the ground.
Sure.
So, yeah, so this whole piece of property, I mean, I don't know how many acres it is. It's huge. We have a huge parkland around us, basically. So we have that to deal with as well. But I was just wondering, was there any requirement that it not be seen from the street or something like that?
Not quite. I think there would have been more difficulty if we were talking about a ground mount array or a carport. But since it was a rooftop array and we used the all black panels, that wasn't as much of a consideration.
We're not even allowed to build a carport here. And we have no indoor parking. So, I mean, so it's really been tough. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. I'll try to get in touch.
No, there are
Sounds good.
definitely a lot of challenges. And I just want to address Lee's question. I did look it up. It's around 500 kilowatt hours of battery storage planned at the wastewater treatment plant, about 100 kilowatt output.
Sounds great. Harvey's got some questions.
Right. So first one, what kind of battery chemistry are you using?
They're I believe lithium ion.
Lithium ion, but are they ferrous or lithium ion ferrous phosphate or?
You can pull up the exact specifications in our contract, which is publicly available, but I don't have that right in front of me.
Okay, and then what rate structure are you using with DTE?
At that site in particular,
No, I assume in general you're using the same rate structure.
yeah, generally we're on the D3, the business electric rate, so just commercial customers. At some of our sites, we have demand rates in place, which I believe is D11.
So that sort of leads into another question. Do the solar edge inverters that you use have the capability that you can arbitrage power by bringing in power, charging your batteries in the middle of the night, discharging the batteries during the day? And is that a strategy you're going to employ?
Yeah, yeah. So they are programmable. So it really depends on the site and sort of the reason for the battery storage. So at sites like our community centers and our senior center, we're less concerned about peak shaving. We're more concerned about having power when we need it to keep those facilities online. But at sites like the water plants, yeah, the plan is to charge those batteries up during the day with the solar energy produced on site, and then have them programmed in a smart manner so that they're discharging during the peak periods, and we're lowering our bill to avoid those demand rates.
Okay, and then a final question. If Ann Arbor goes to a total ownership model, is there a future where Ann Arbor is totally divorced from DTE and your robust backup is all in batteries?
I suppose it's possible. There are discussions around various forms of municipalization going on currently. The city has proposed a sustainable electricity utility, which would be parallel to the current electrical grid. We'd be doing a lot of behind the meter solar, deep energy efficiency, neighborhood microgrids, and that sort of thing. So we'd have neighborhood scale battery storage that could provide backup in the event of outages in a neighborhood, and neighborhood by neighborhood sort of.
Okay, and is there any thoughts around integrating parking meters with vehicle charging so that the solar cells and batteries could have another revenue source by encouraging people to park and charge, and so it could be a revenue source for the city?
You're asking about networked EV charging that charges the user of the system.
Yeah, let's say you had got all these parking structures all over. You put solar cells on top of them, put some batteries in there, and then charge the people that park can charge their EVs, and the city can make additional revenue because they're allowing people to charge their EVs.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have looked at solar at many of our parking facilities. Those are more managed by the DDA, the Downtown Development Authority, most of those large parking structures. We haven't currently been successful in putting solar on any of those due to sort of structural questions, wind loads, and things like that. But I think we will be successful at some point in the future. We have deployed a significant amount of public EV charging at this point, that is creating revenue for the city. So we worked with the DDA in 2021 to install 40 dual port level 2 chargers in various downtown garages that all have fees to use. We've also installed 4 fast chargers at City Hall that users can pay for, and also a few curbside EV chargers in the Old Fourth Ward that were activated in November of last year.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Great questions. Dave Curtis, you're up.
Hello, I just wondered if you could touch a little bit on how you and the city interacts with the University of Michigan in this respect.
That's a good question.
Yeah, so uh, we have quite a bit of back and forth when it comes to the our offices of sustainability with the Office of Campus Sustainability. Um, and a lot of that happens at sort of various levels. So there's higher up communication between the city administrator and administrators at the university, and also the directors of our sustainability departments. We were involved in the production, or my supervisor, Dr. Missy Stultz, was on the commission at the university to the president's commission on carbon neutrality. So we helped sort of create that. When it comes to solar specifically, we released an RFP for solar last year, about a year ago, at the same time as the University of Michigan. And the hope was to see some economies of scale in the bids that came back, because the university really put forth the desire for a lot of solar, basically expanding to as much behind the meter solar as possible on their central and north campuses here in Ann Arbor. And we received bids back. The bids were received separately, so the university and city received separate bids back, and we've been moving forward at this point independently on
Hi.
those.
This meeting is a little boring, so I'm gonna just get off. Okay, I got off the meeting.
That's
So-
great. Thank you.
I really apologize for that. So keep going.
So we've been moving forward independently on those bids that came back. So I'm not sure the exact status of their RFP and their bids, but I know they're working hard on behind the meter solar as well at their facilities.
This meeting is not boring. This is fascinating stuff. Ann Arbor is on the cutting edge of all the cities in the state of Michigan, and we look to Ann Arbor to setting the pace of what can be done. So I really apologize for that rudeness of one of our attendees. Lee, you're up.
Yeah, a little comment about parking structures. Don't trade a bunch of renewable energy for a excessive amount of salt from keeping the cars from sliding down the ramps. I think we have to be very careful in this climate to let the sun do its job and not have drip lines and black ice and stuff like that on the top surface of the parking garage. But my main question is this: it goes back to what John said about, oh, now we have 110% of our annual usage. And I wonder, if you have a baseball park and have lighting, when the lights are on a very short time in the evening, you're not using very much power, but yet the transformer's there, the wires are there. And that seems to me like a perfect place to build 300% of your normal meter. And when are we going to get DTE, or when are you going to have your own electrical system where you can actually size your system based on the capacity that's already there, rather than based on how much electricity you used? So
Yeah, absolutely.
good luck.
We're continually pushing on DTE, intervening in rate cases and lobbying at the state level with our lobbyists to push those requirements and to make them more favorable for solar here in town. But also the sustainable energy utility I mentioned, being a parallel utility, it would likely enable some of those things we're talking about, really maximizing solar on these sites and creating more of a community solar resource than we currently are able to obtain.
Do you have any kind of a quick update, Simi, about the sustainable energy utility and what the status is in the process?
So there, don't have a great update. It's not something I work on quite as closely. There are a lot of communications going on. I believe so. City Council, we had a phase one study that was commissioned last year. It was delivered this year within the last couple months. So it's been sort of been in the digestion of City Council, and now it's a question of sort of what's the step from there. Is it another study, or are there other options to more immediately sort of move an SCU forward?
Sounds great. Nikki, you're up.
Yeah, my question ties in with what Lee was talking about with the excessive lights at one point. If this community solar passes the legislature, have you considered using community solar to be able to exceed the 10% DTE limits?
I think that's sort of the intent, is to build out larger scale community solar systems that then residents can enroll in, that wouldn't necessarily be limited by their sort of electrical load on an annual basis.
So you've considered that as a municipality also?
So we're currently don't have the legislative power without having a municipal electric utility to do anything like that. But that's where, the next few months is a pretty exciting time to see what's going to happen, and if that sort of opens up as a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
Just so everybody knows, State Senator Jeff Irwin from Ann Arbor is one of the authors of the Community Solar 2-bill package in the state Senate. And the last couple of weeks in my weekly newsletters to GLREA members, I'm asking all of you to send emails to your state senators to support community solar. So if you haven't sent an email to your state senator, please look on the weekly update newsletter I sent out this week. I think I sent it out Monday and Wednesday, and there's a link there that will take you to the website where you can send an email. All you need to do is type in your address and your state senator will pop up. There's already a message that you can use, but we definitely encourage you to personalize it in support of community solar. Harvey Bell's got another question.
Yeah, so as a residential solar provider, if I'm in a net positive, will community solar allow me to sell power, say, to the city of Ann Arbor rather than the DTE? Because currently I'm running a dynamic peak pricing. So what happens in that situation?
So I can't really answer specifically, I don't think. But the sustainable energy utility would, the idea is you would be able to sell excess electricity or share it with your neighbors through the city's utility. So, I'm not sure, since you're currently engaged in the model with DTE, how that might change if and when a sustainable energy utility were created. It's also the sustainable energy utility has a structure that it's not immediately going to get to the full phase deployment of neighborhood scale microgrids and power sharing between neighbors. It's going to start more likely with things like on-bill financing for energy efficiency and renewable energy, solar, rooftop solar, that sort of thing. So it's sort of a later phase. I think that you're sort of describing.
Yeah, well, I don't live in the city of Ann Arbor anyway, but this is sort of hopefully a vision for the future. I was just trying to see where you guys were.
Yep, absolutely.
I can't emphasize enough how the sustainable energy utility concept is so revolutionary if it's successful. I mean, because, without having the cost of municipalizing, DTE would be so expensive. in terms of litigation and trying to figure out what the value of DTE assets are. And then the city of Ann Arbor would have to bring up the new ownership of the grid, which is old, and which is why, every time there's a storm, even in a city as relatively well off as Ann Arbor, they still lose power a lot. So the sustainable energy utility, we've had Missy Stoltz on before where she's talked about it. And we are looking at that as a model that other cities could utilize around the state and frankly, probably around the country. So we are really excited and really applaud, Simi, the work that you and your colleagues are doing about this, this new brilliant concept. I think Marcia's got another question. Marcia, you're on mute.
Absolutely. While Marcia's getting
Okay.
off mute, I appreciate that feedback, John, and Missy's out talking about the sustainable energy utility tonight. And we have a great page on the A2Gov website devoted to the sustainable energy utility. You can read the white paper that was produced, watch videos about it. So I encourage you all to do that if you haven't already.
And we
Could
have
Could you send that to John and have him share that with all of us? Those websites and
Yeah, absolutely.
information. Thank you. I love the broad view you gave us. And I'm in Traverse City half of the year, and Traverse City itself is very interested in going forward this way, but I don't think it's ever come up with this kind of a plan. And I think it would be wonderful if somebody here who could do something about that could access your assistance or whomever you recommend in the Ann Arbor setting. That's really kind of a question. Is there
Marcia, your comment is great because I was going to ask the same thing, that if other cities are interested in maybe figuring out how Ann Arbor is doing it, could they potentially contact you to seek some advice or learn from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, part of sort of our goal in Ann Arbor is to lay models that other communities can sort of try to implement themselves, and also when we are unsuccessful in things to communicate that as well, so that we're not all sort of messing up in the same places. But I'd say as far as how the sustainable energy utility concept came up here, is it started as an investigation into community choice aggregation, and that was a community-wide energy procurement method that was cited in our A20 plan originally. And we talked with some of the leaders in the CCA space, and one of their names, I believe, was Paul Fenn, who spoke at an energy commission meeting it was a few years ago at this point, but that was a really good seminar. So when I send some stuff over to John, I'll see if I can find that video and share it. And really, CCA 3.0 is what it's called, and that's pretty similar to what became known as the SEU here locally. So really focusing on behind the meter solar generation, deep energy efficiency, and community scale microgrids, to really lessen the amount of electricity that we're pulling from the grid, being DTE currently.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that DTE and consumers have opposed microgrid legislation. They have opposed community solar legislation. So by Ann Arbor creating its own utility, they're not prevented from doing those things by state law because they are in fact a utility. And that's why it's absolutely brilliant, because it's nothing that DTE could stop. They may try and, file a lawsuit of sorts, but once this concept is proven to be legal and just and proper, then Ann Arbor can do anything a utility wants to do. But unlike these investor-owned utilities, the sustainable energy utility would be progressive and would work on behalf of the citizens in Ann Arbor to generate, energy at lower cost and fighting climate change and everything we all believe in. So it's wonderful. Any last?
Traverse City has its own light and power company. Traverse City does, and the county owns the water treatment facility. So I think we are a good place to sort of try this out. You know,
No-
this,
No, I think you're right, Marcia. The mayor of Traverse City, assuming it's the same mayor, he was very progressive as well. So I think,
I think it probably wasn't the same, isn't the same one. you
yeah.
think.
But I think Traverse City, I think Grand Rapids, there are a number of communities I think would be ripe for a sustainable energy utility once Ann Arbor blazes the trail. So any other final questions or comments anyone wants
Thank
to
you.
make?
Thank you very much,
Go ahead,
Simi.
Harvey. You get the final say.
Okay, so in terms of this whole discussion, if one of the things I've been struggling with is we regulate utilities in this state with a century-old set of rules. And somewhere there really needs to be some deep thought and change the fundamental set of structures that we regulate the utilities with to more, update it to the 21st century. Is there any work anywhere going on in that arena?
Well, Harvey, as a matter of fact, I mean, you're talking about the Public Service Commission, and the
Right.
Public Service Commission, they're only able to regulate based upon the authority they're given by state statute. But last
Right.
November, there actually was a huge upgrade in the authority of the Public Service Commission. Now the Public Service Commission can evaluate rate cases and equally as importantly, integrated resource plans by the impact on climate change, the affordability of the rates, the impact on public health. So when DTE and consumers submit their integrated resource plans, which is a concept that was enacted in 2016, which essentially is a blueprint on how DTE and consumers are going to generate their electricity in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, they now have to submit plans that take into consideration the impact on climate change, the impact on public health, and the affordability of the rates. And so now the Public Service Commission can say to DTE, your plan is unacceptable because you don't comport with these new factors, which are now a part of state law. So there have been some fundamental improvements that have been done, and GLREA is continually getting involved with, just like Ann Arbor, we're both intervened in these rate cases in order to work with the Public Service Commission to do a better oversight of DTE and consumers. And
I'm
so,
talking about a more fundamental change than that. I understand that aspect, but I really think we need as a society a totally different model for utilities.
well, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with Harvey, but that unfortunately, the Public Service Commission is the body in current Michigan law that regulates the utilities. And so the only way we could change fundamentally is to pass legislation. And that
Right.
is not an easy lift, considering the
Well, I understand.
No, I know you do. One final comment. I'm going to let everybody go. Katie Watson, who is a GLREA member, she was here tonight. She is a student at University of Michigan and runs an organization called Students for Clean Energy. She just said that it was a wonderful presentation tonight. And she is actually, along with her student organization, is holding an event tomorrow at 5:30 at the Ann Arbor District Library. And so if you're all interested in learning more about Students for Clean Energy and the student PERGs and meeting Katie in person, I would suggest you all go to the Ann Arbor District Library tomorrow at 5:30. These students are doing some terrific work and you can learn more. So with that, I want to thank Simi Barr for a great presentation. And again, you're doing amazing work. And we're all looking to you for guidance and for inspiration. So thank you so much.
Thank you all.